Nearly everything that is created, that we create in this world can be can be construed as a product. And in thinking about the design process, the landscape design process, that's often something of a source of tension, especially coming from our university training, that the iterative design process that we all go through, that we all chose to take on as our profession, it's something that is completely custom, completely unique to the sites and the client that we are designing for. Well, today I want to challenge that. I want to revisit the notion of productization, taking our design processes and turning that into a product as a more palatable way to sell that to design clients. Stay tuned. Giving architects and landscape architects the tools and strategies to be seen, heard, and valued in the marketplace, and telling the stories of leaders building thriving design firms and attracting their ideal clients. This is From Architecture to Profitecture. I'm your host, Jay Krakowski. Let's get started. Fellow and future Profitex, hello, how are you? Welcome to this week's show. We are talking about our design process as a product. And I know that may ruffle some feathers for a lot of folks. This is coming on the heels of a series of lively discussions on Facebook and over on the Clubhouse app. If you haven't jumped on the Clubhouse app and you're on an iOS device, head over there and follow me and a number of other architects and designers that are having great conversations. But the idea just today, came up again of productization in a conversation about pricing and value, quote unquote value, such a subjective term, right? Well, what's the opposite of being subjective? That's coming up with a defined process and product that we can present to our design clients and sell them on that so that they can enter into a working relationship with us. And I think the hardest thing to maybe wrap our brains around and come up with in terms of running our businesses is the idea of defining that relationship as a product and selling that as a package deal, so to speak. Because that's really what I'm trying to get at here is that, yes, a design product in our industry could be a set of stock plans for a house. I'm in the residential design field. It could be a materials palette that we sell, say as on the interior design side. It could be a set of planting species, a planting palette, so to speak, on the landscape design side. Yes, those are all viable business structures. Those are all viable ways to add income, certainly to our business. They're all revenue streams that we could and honestly should be looking at. I'm looking into those myself. Something more packaged and impersonal, right? Something that doesn't respond directly to a specific site necessarily, although that opportunity is there through customization. I've had folks on the podcast from Perch Plans, Tim Brown, and I've been following and talking to a number of other folks that are packaging their design products that way, but rather I want to challenge you to look at your process, that could be a product as well. And we're going to get into some examples of that as this podcast unfolds here. Take a look at your design process and take a look at those industry standards, AIA, ASLA, ASID, what have you. Take a look at those phases: concept, schematic, design development, construction documentation, and throw those out the window. Our clients don't care about them. At the end of the day, they don't care about that design process. And it's not to say they don't care about our process. They don't care about the way that we engage them in design and how we achieve results and solutions for their particular problems, but rather the names of them, the names of those stages, of those phases, they don't matter. So coming up with I'll say it again, a more palatable way to sell our design services and there's probably a whole other podcast episode about the notion of selling, that selling might feel, icky, sleazy, slimy to many folks in the design fields, when rather I approach it as a level of serving. Selling is serving. Again, I'll save that for a whole other episode, perhaps next week. But in being able to look at our design process from either from a third perspective, an outside perspective, or stepping into the client's shoes and understanding that they don't care about the design phases. They don't care how we do what we do. Rather, they care about the end product, the end goal. To say it again, that end product, yes, it can be packaged as a set of stock plans, but rather our design process can be packaged just the same way, can be sold just the same way, can be displayed on our websites, can be talked about in our social media channels just the same way. As you start to tell client stories, you can say, well, because of this part of the ABC process. In my case, it's the renovation review process. It's the new build blueprint process. I have a package that I sell my clients, and again, I'm in the residential space, so that's going to look different depending on the scale and the scope of work that you choose to take on. But it's something that I can anchor the discussion around. And the notion of describing the differences between schematic design and design development is, for someone who's not in the industry, it's painful. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. It's painful to the layman. Like, what is the difference? Why am I paying for both? What's in it for me is kind of the big overall question that most clients are asking us, right? Why are you charging thousands upon thousands of dollars for ABC XYZ? I just want to get to the end result. So coming up with a process and coming up with a 2 or 3 word product for that process to define the entire working relationship is the challenge. That's something I want to challenge you with, and that is a huge marketing challenge. Not to overuse the word here, but that's one thing that I would love you to take a hard look at. That's one thing that I had to take a hard look at after just a year or so of being in business, is that I can't just rely on my network of past clients. I need to go out and market myself to a completely quote unquote cold audience, to cold clients. No, not cold calling. Not a fan of that. Defining this in a packaged product it's easy for them to understand and digest. And one kind of overarching theme that I want to stress to you is, and that I have started to learn, only started, I'm not perfect at it by any means, is that structure actually creates freedom. When I first went out on my own, almost 6 years ago now, I jumped out on my own because I wanted to have that freedom, that I could schedule my weeks and my days the way that I saw fit. Well, if you don't have any kind of structure to your days, and certainly how you approach your design process, you are in for a world of hurt and a world of unprofitability, if that's a word. You're approaching it as a hobby, not as a business. And at the end of the day, while we all love to design, while we all jumped into architecture, landscape architecture, and then interior design, graphic design as related professions, we are here to make a living. We're here to provide for our families and to secure our retirement and old age and investments and all that good stuff. So at the end of the day, if we're not making this a profitable business, what's the point? It's just a design exercise, just a hobby, as we were taking on in school perhaps. So while structure creates freedom, kind of looking internally as a business owner, from the client perspective, providing that structure to them creates a level of certainty. That is huge. While it may provide some sort of level of freedom that we can operate within that design process internally, when the client comes to you and you're able to say, hey, this is my ABC process. In my case, it's the renovation review process for my whole home renovation design clients. And they say, okay, I have a process that I'm entering into. It makes the sale that much easier. It makes the understanding that you are the person to help guide them through this often complex and confusing design and construction process. Perhaps most of your clients, certainly most of mine, have never engaged with a designer, interior designer, architect, landscape architect, general contractor before. And this is all new to them. They're only getting what they hear from their friends and family and what they see on HGTV, which is completely misleading, probably in both cases, right? So to come to them with a framework and a structure that's not as cryptic as concept SD, DD, CD, CA, it makes the working relationship so much easier. So that's one thing I want to challenge you to just take a step back in the coming weeks and take a look at. And I want to get into a couple of examples of how we might approach that. First, at a high level, a more existential, emotional level, are the ideas that the companies Red Bull and Apple have put forth, where they're not actually talking about their product or their process at all. And they are hugely successful, obviously, hugely powerful brands in the world. Red Bull doesn't, if you look at their Instagram especially, they don't even show a picture of the darn little can of sugar and food coloring and who knows what else is in there. They don't talk about that. They talk about the identity and the lifestyle of the end consumer. And Apple doesn't talk about the M1 chip and the aluminum that's used to make the backings of their iMacs or their Mac Minis, the little cans that sit on or below your desk. Rather, they're talking about the identity of the designer, of the person that wants everything integrated and simple to use. And we can take lessons from those directly to inform how we market our design services. And that's one thing that I continue to try to impart to my design clients through my website, through my social media, are the stories of clients that I have worked with and successes that I have brought to them in looking at these two companies that produce products, sugary drink and computers, but their marketing doesn't talk about that at all. Well, as architects, as landscape architects and designers, how can we speak to the emotions that they are feeling before they get into the design process, whether that's they have a house that doesn't work for them, they have a commercial space that doesn't suit their business, they have a vacant, derelict, open space that needs a beautiful landscape design to serve the public. And yes, this can be translated to even civic works. It doesn't have to be the private residential field or the private commercial field. How can we tell those stories of clients that evoke emotion, and then we tie that to a process with 3, 5, 7 steps, what have you. I will suggest that going to 3 or 5 is a heck of a lot easier to sell, heck of a lot easier for folks to swallow if you have a 12-step design process, a 17-step design process. That can easily get overwhelming. That said, my third example of a process, a sellable process, is from the Toyota Motor Corporation, the Toyota Way. They have a 14-step process. Can seem overwhelming. Of course, they're in the business of producing cars, right? But at the core of the Toyota Way are the notions of respect for people and continuous improvement. And those are values. Those have nothing to do with putting rubber tires on wheels. Those have nothing to do with welding metal together or painting metal or glass or electronic systems, anything like that. They're deeper values than that. And that's kind of at the core of what I want to get to with this episode, is that explaining our design processes should focus rather on the emotion and the values that we want to put forth into the world and that we want to see back from our clients. The clients that we want to bring into our ecosystems, into our design firms, would exude those values as well. That's what makes for the best working relationships. Think back to clients that you have worked with, either as an employee or as now a design firm owner, where everything just clicked. Everything felt easy. If you have even one of those stories, in fact, especially if you have just one of those stories, especially as a design firm owner, whether you're a startup or not, dial down on those, focus on those. When the working relationship felt easy and everything was in flow, so to speak, I don't want to get too woo-woo here, but that could be the basis of your entire marketing campaign, of your website, of your social media, of paid ads, whatever the heck it is. Focus on that. You could just tell one story over and over and over because that working relationship was easy. And then think about how you led them through your design process. And again, leave the industry standard terms to the side. Make that an internal process for you. That's great. If you need to bill against SD, DD, CD, fantastic. Go ahead and do that. But your external, your outward facing marketing, that process, give that a funny name. It could be, and I'll quote my one of my online mentors, Brandon Lucero, have been quoting the last few weeks, oogly boogly. He said this in a live stream, the oogly boogly method. It doesn't matter what it is, but if you can build the ideas of the identity of the client that you're trying to attract and how your design process, works with them, integrates their values into arriving at a final design solution, more power to you, and you can build a whole story around that, as ridiculous as it sounds. Now, it's probably not going to be as crazy as that, but if you're focusing on emotion and on values, then whatever story you create, whatever process you decide to come up with, and however many phases it has, again, simpler is better. 3 is awesome if you can do that. That becomes so much of an easier sell, and we're not having to justify each and every hour spent or phase delivered or what have you. Start to come at it from standing in their shoes, from seeing it as a layman, someone who has not gone through design school and perhaps multiple degrees as we have. I hope this episode has been helpful for you, and hopefully you can take a step back in the coming week or weeks to look at the emotions that your past successful clients have had and how your design process kind of met those or achieved those, and then start to think of your design process in ways that aren't the industry standards, but rather are something more akin to marketing a car or cereal or clothing. Think about how these bigger brands out in the world are marketing their products. They're not talking about thread count of jeans, or in the case of Apple, the M1 processor in their computer or the sugar level of Red Bull, right? They're talking about lifestyle and the identity. And in tying that to a design process, it's an interesting kind of ever-evolving exercise that I think that the AEC fields desperately need, because there's such a disconnect between the general public, the layman, so to speak, and what we do as design professionals, and how we can start to bring that closer together, how we can make that more palatable so that our business becomes easier, how those sales become easier, because we can start to market in the way that more of the general public understands. I want to leave you with a quote of the week from Victor Papanek. The only important thing about design is how it relates to people. Materials and line work and penmanship aside, we are designing spaces for people at the end of the day. And if we aren't tailoring our work, which I think we all do, but then tailoring our design process and the marketing of the design process into how people think and how people understand that, well, we're doing our profession a disservice, and we need to start to change our mindset and on how we market our design processes. And I hope that what I've talked about this week is a different way to look at it and is helpful for you. If you haven't already, leave me a review on Apple Podcasts. I'd certainly appreciate it. Or over on Spotify if you happen to be there. Hopefully I've earned a 5-star review from you. If you have any questions for me or have any suggestions for topics or guests you want to see on the show, leave me a DM at Jay Krakowski, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. And until next week, go out and make it a great week because our success is inevitable. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you stay up to date with future episodes. Connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn at Jake Krakowski. And for show notes and much more, visit profitecturebydesign.com/podcast.